What's going on, Gator Nation? Another big commitment for blue chip Billy in the Florida Gators. This one did not come without trolls from Florida State, but the Gators get a huge flip from Roderick Kearney, 4-star, and who better to talk about this with than Corey Bender? Corey, any surprise here? Was this in the works, and what does this mean for Florida?
Yeah, I think he kind of went back and forth. So he visited twice earlier this year, and there was a lot of buzz. A lot of people thought he actually could have flipped his commitment early this year. I was almost leaning towards back to Florida State in recent weeks just because the way FSU season was going. He got back to Tallahassee a few times, so it kind of shifted a little bit for me. But all along, Florida felt pretty positive. Even after he officially visited Florida in the summer, and just within an hour or two after leaving campus, he committed to Florida State, and that's when the trolling all started. And it was definitely a stinger, a bad mark for the Florida staff the way it kind of played out. But even with that being said, Florida never gave up. They kept recruiting the kid, and he's an Under Armour All-American. I mean, Florida right now has almost a dozen All-Americans in this class. It's a really stacked class for that game, and they really kept pressing for this kid. And now they have 3 offensive linemen in the class, so joining Najee Harris and Bryce Lovett. But getting Kearney, he's definitely the highlight. He's definitely the headliner in that group. A very versatile kid. I think he can play guard and he can play tackle. I think long term he might be best suited at right tackle, but really good frame. Can add a lot of quality weight over the next couple of years. Doesn't hold a lot of bad weight, and I think this commitment is one of the bigger ones this cycle. Just offensive line was one of those needs. The offensive line's always been kind of a need for this cycle, and Najee Harris and Bryce Lovett are good players, but with Kearney, he's a top 100 player regardless with the on 300 and in the on 3 consensus ranking. So you get a kid who's he's a wrestler too. Really shows a good base, really just a nasty kid in the trenches, and definitely a huge win for this staff. And this also comes ahead of a potential another massive commitment later this week for the Gators.
I love Billy Napier likes guys that play 2 sports. I love guys that wrestle, especially offensive line, defensive line, because you learn about leverage and the way to use your body and use leverage to win those battles that you will get specifically in the trenches.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and not just a wrestler too. I mean, he's a really good wrestler too. He's not just a kid that, hey, he does it to stay in shape and just does it because he likes it. I mean, he's very high quality in wrestling, and I'm not sure he had Division I looks for that sport, but from all the pictures I've seen in recent years, he's always in that number 1 spot on the podium, getting medals and stuff. And like you said, good base, learns how to play with good leverage, and one of those kids just has that nasty type of playing style. Really kind of fits what Rob Sale and Darnell Stapleton want from their offensive linemen. A kid that's not really always in the media too, is always kind of like with the stars and, hey, I want to be ranked this and that. He just kind of puts his head down and goes to work, and there's no drama attached to this kid. He's just one of those kids who I think over time he can become a multi-year starter for the Orange and Blue.
And as you mentioned, I mean, if you look at Florida's offensive line, you're going to lose Richard Garrard. You could lose Ethan White. You could lose Kingsley Eguakon. Osiris Torrance is gone. Michael Tarquin's back, but you're looking at replacing 4 starters potentially, definitely 3 starters on the offensive line. Not saying that Kearney or any of the guys who are freshmen will be able to step in right away, but it's certainly a position where, and maybe you feel the same way, I think you need to get 4 to 5 offensive linemen every class because it's a position where you have to project so much, and there's a lot of development that takes place.
Yeah, offensive line is the one position group where it's very rare when you have a kid that comes in and starts right away, or even like earns quality playing time. You have those few kids every cycle that are the number 1 kid in a position, or those few 5 stars that can kind of step in and play. But definitely, like you said, if you're not going to have that instant day 1 guy, I mean, these are guys who can definitely add depth over years to come. And at least as a redshirt freshman, I think Kearney does have that type of skill set where obviously maybe in year 1 he might not start, but over time as a redshirt freshman or even as a sophomore, if he does a redshirt, he's one of those guys who can kind of challenge for a starting role at multiple spots. That's why I kind of think this addition for Florida is a good quality, massive addition just because of his versatility and his ranking. I mean, he's a top 5 interior offensive lineman, but you look at his frame, his quick feet, not much bad weight at all. You could see him projecting as a tackle as well. And I know with Stapleton and Sale, they recruit a lot of these guys who can play multiple spots along the offensive front. So I think with him, you look at his offer sheet too. I mean, you have Georgia was in the running for him. So even about a month or two ago, when it was rumored he was going to decommit from Florida State, Georgia was one of those schools that really wanted him on campus for an official. So this kid had committable offers from a lot of the national powers, and for Florida to kind of come out and win this, especially when it was kind of trending a little bit more towards Florida State in recent weeks, it definitely shows like how strong of a staff this is when it comes to recruiting.
And with the news of Kearney committing to Florida, the Gators have jumped Clemson, starting to leave Miami in their dust, and is the number 8 offensive or recruiting class in the country, according to our rankings at On3. 17 4-stars, 5 3-stars, and 22 total commits. Might have the first 5-star later in the week. We won't spoil that. That'll be another video. Where do you see Florida? Obviously, there's most of the top prospects are committed, but how high can Florida's class get? If you look at the top 5, it's almost all SEC. You've got 3 of the 5 are SEC teams. Can Florida get past Texas, Oklahoma, and get into top 5 territory?
Yeah, and you also have to be realistic. I mean, I think they definitely can be at the back end of the top 5. Not later this week. I mean, Florida's projected to get a massive commitment. Nothing's official yet, but we're all, right now leaning towards Florida to get their first 5-star in the class. And let alone with that commitment, that should bump them up probably around 2 spots. And if that's the case, they're right outside the top 5. And then you have other guys on the board too, like Quay Russo. You have James Smith on the board, John Walker, who's another flip candidate who's committed to UCF. There's still a lot of quality players on the board for Florida right now. And you look at the class, like you said, they're already almost at 2 dozen spots already filled. And then obviously you have the transfer portal. It can be a very quality class. I know early on people kept signaling, hey, the 2024 class is going to be really special. It's like, well, hold up. This 2023 class, I mean, I think people kind of get impatient with recruiting. You lose one battle and all of a sudden everything starts going downhill. And it kind of shows to the staff they never, even with the season too, it's not like Florida's had a lights out season on the field, and that's what's even more impressive. They've kind of stayed in the mix for a lot of these high quality kids, giving them a lot of optimism for the future, saying, hey, look at like ETN, Montrell Johnson, a lot of these guys who've kind of came in. I mean, you have a lot of young guys who have stepped in for Florida and got early playing time, and that appeals to a lot of these kids. You always hear on the recruiting trail the best guy will play. And I'm not saying a lot of coaches kind of like lie about that, but you always see a lot of seniority over that most of the time. Where Florida really they've kind of backed up their word when it comes to that. So
For sure.
I think a lot of these kids are excited for what's to come in Gainesville. The blueprint that Billy Napier has in place, and I think you're starting to see those results now starting to carry over to the recruiting trail.
And they talk about that footprint, that 6-hour footprint around Gainesville, Orange Park, Florida, less than 2 hours away. So this is a big gift for Florida. As Corey and I have both mentioned, the week is not over. It's a big week, Florida, Georgia, in Jacksonville, but there will be there's already some recruiting fireworks, and there could be more later on this week. We'll be back here, so make sure you check out Gators Online. Take advantage of our $10 flash sale right now. Get an entire year of access to Gators Online for just $10. No one better doing recruiting than Corey, and Zach and I, not too bad doing football. If I can pat myself on the back, Corey.
Definitely.
All right, you stay tuned, and Gators Online will be back with you later this week.